Hey, everybody, welcome back to Practical Liberty. This is my bi-weekly special with my business partner from the future, Mr. Nick Watts. How are things down there in Australia?
Doing great down here. You have to excuse the background. There's a lot of clutter behind me in the garage because I'm a prepper now. So we just had our petrol gasoline generator delivered and it's sitting right behind me. So I thought I'd spare you all of that.
We need to start coming up with a name for this particular series. So I don't know, like What's Happening? That might be one. Sassy Watts could be another one, right? The Sass Company, Mr. Watts. Too corny. I don't know. What do you
I've,
got?
I've got lots of puns. My first girlfriend was the daughter of the principal at my high school. And so he was just the king of dad jokes. So I got just so many pun things on my name.
Any that work for a show title?
Probably not. They're insulting and distasteful. What can you do?
That's the best kind.
What's happening?
Yeah, what's happening? What's going on? What's up? It's all so corny. We'll have to find something that actually works. All right, so there are a couple topics we wanted to talk about today, and one was kind of you were asking me some questions about info products in the kind of info product industry. So I thought that would be a good place to kick this off. So I guess what specifically did you have in mind with the info product world? Because it's a giant world.
Yeah, it is. So there's basically two pathways I see for an info product. One is that I'm going to use it to actually make money. It's the business. The way I make money is by getting people to pay for the info product. The other is that the info product is some kind of a lead magnet into something else. Or if you're a freelancer, which I'm sort of heading in that direction, using it as client acquisition. So have you ever used an info product for client acquisition purposes? And what was that like? I guess is the first question.
I tried writing like some free ebooks and downloadable stuff in early on in my career as lead magnets. A lot of people. So my friend Kevin Rogers has something he calls like the authority content. Like so, you post something or create some type of document or I don't know piece of content that really demonstrates your authority in one specific area. And that is supposed to generate attention. So you promote that one piece. It's something that you spend a long time really crafting and honing, and it's like kind of your statement of like, here's how I'm unique and qualified to approach this specific thing, specific skill set, really. So you can do it that way. It depends on the type of freelancing you're doing. There's a lot of different types of info products. Like an ebook can be an info product where also like a 4 module 39 video course like my Breaking Free freelancing course is an info product. So like we're talking about a wide range of things. And I know people like Dan Kennedy sells a ton of info products. So he'll sell an info product on like how jewelers can market their business. And then his upsell to that person will be like, well, let me write your whole campaign for you for $100,000. So he sells them the Dan Kennedy book, like the front of the funnel is basically a break even. It's no BS advertising, right? Or no BS or the ultimate sales letter, whichever path you come into. And then he gets you into one of his like $1,000 or $2,000 info courses. And then if you're really qualified and you're making a lot of money, then you have to work with him personally. So that's kind of the Ascension model he has. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. It can be done, especially if you have higher end products that are going to sell to a business that's doing enough to hire freelancers.
Yeah, okay, interesting. So yeah, I guess it depends what level of your what did you call it? The ascension stage of a customer. It's kind of like the opposite of a funnel.
No, it's exactly a funnel. So the top of the funnel is that wide regular book or ebook. The next part of the funnel is an actual paid course, and then the last part of the funnel, this is greatly oversimplifying, is that like $50,000 $100,000 project with a client, and scale those numbers to wherever your business is. Like a lot of people will never do $100,000 project, but they might have $10,000 projects they can do in a year, or $100,000 projects that they can do in a year. So whatever your top end is at that very pinnacle of your best customer, and then you need to cast a wider net of people that are mostly not going to be qualified to work with you one on one, but maybe in the future could be. That's the other thing about like I referenced Dan Kennedy, so I'll stick with him. He's been doing it for 40 years
Yeah,
and speaking at seminars and writing, 20 some books. So his top of the funnel is just enormous. And there are people that worked with or followed him for 20 years before they ever hired him. So a lot of this is time in the game too.
yeah, yeah. Fair enough. That authority content idea, I think that has been my experience. I didn't have a name for it, but like I published this book about what the Bible says about taxes, and now like people come to me to talk about that. Now people contact me to talk about that because that's out there. Didn't really plan it that way. I thought I'd have a funnel leading to people buying the book, but in practice, People find out about the book and then they want to talk to me.
Yeah. Now imagine if that had anything to do with programming,
Yeah.
where your freelance career
Well,
would
this
be.
is what I'm thinking. Maybe I need to do something like that to set up for people should come to me for this particular problem to get solved.
It's hard to do that with a single, like, I like the authority content thing. What I really like is the have a channel or an outlet where you actually display your skills on a semi-regular basis, like weekly or bi-weekly or even monthly, having something that people can come back and check in on. And it's a body of work instead of just one. I don't know. Info products are such an interesting space, right? It's a $240 billion industry. If you just look at the general stats of like anything that teaches online, that's $240 billion a year. So it's hard to like nail down everything, but info products are kind of going. I think one of the downsides of all this AI stuff that's out there is that everybody has learned that you can get, ChatGPT or Cloud.ai or one of those to write you a 500-page course or, 39 video scripts that you can record, just aggregating all the data from the internet. And so like people are terrified of buying courses because they're paying, $100, $300, $500, and it's AI generated content that teaches them nothing that they couldn't find on Google. So like
Mm.
I'm personally like I have my Breaking Free course is an info product. There's a community attached to it, but for the most part, it's just the courses. Everything I'm launching for the rest of this year is either SaaS based, so a monthly subscription like we're doing, which you're the only SaaS partner I have. Don't worry, there's not a lot of SaaS things. Everything else is community based. So with Tane Nix, actually, when this comes out, we're launching our webinar tomorrow, and this is his whole wealth, international wealth format, which is about how to get some of your money overseas, how to secure your freedom by eliminating sovereign risk. It's a really cool webinar. Go to goxplan.com/Tane to sign up. Watch that for free. But attached to that is a community. It's going to be a community of people that are interested in traveling overseas, investing overseas, finding a second residency, maybe locating overseas temporarily or permanently. But it's a community of people. The X plan means it's your plan. You define
Mm.
what it is. But it's a community of people that all see the world the same way and are moving towards that goal. And then with Marcella Allison later in the year, probably May, it looks like, I'm launching another copywriting community. And this is, it's Marcella and I are going to be running the show, but it's really a bringing people together because, as in freelancing, you get as many jobs from fellow freelancers as you do from like meeting clients. So that the whole community support thing is such a huge aspect of a freelancer life. And I think more and more people are going to need it as more and more of the world goes freelance. The community aspect is like it's replacing the office, like uh, socialization and antics like that. Now it's not quite the same because you're in online rooms where there's something good about being in a real space with real people, but at the same time, it is replacing some of the socialization and the support and the, you know, I need advice on this type of project. I've never done this before. You can go to your community. Not having the community, it makes freelancing a whole lot harder.
Yeah, which I guess that brings up another thing I wanted to talk about if we pivot, I guess, for a second while we're there. You were talking on another podcast recently about the how vital it is to meet people in person, look them in the eye, shake their hand, and that's how business gets done. That's how people make deals. They want to connect with you in person, and that's really important for progressing a career. That's a pain for me because I live in the butt end of nowhere down in Australia. Not the butt end of nowhere. I'm close to large cities here, but relative to the rest of the world, like the English speaking world is mostly in the other hemisphere from me. I'm in completely the wrong
Right.
time zone. I'd have to spend thousands of dollars to fly and meet someone, and so it's not practical. So if I was going to try and get clients, do I need to just focus on people who are local? Do I need to have a much stronger maybe content game online or something like that to make up for not being able to see people in person who are clients maybe in the US or the UK? Do you have any advice? Have you done much seeking out networking clients who are far away from you, or have you tended to pretty much always meet them?
I mean, it depends on what you mean by far away. Like I've traveled to events in San Diego. That was probably the farthest I've ever gone for an event. That's exactly the opposite corner of the United States from me. Um, a lot of times you go to Florida or Texas or Las Vegas, so it's some travel, but we're talking 5 hours, 6 hours on a plane, not 32 like you would have to do to come to me.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of benefit to finding local events first and like actually just getting your first few deals with people that you could drive to their house. Like that, all my first deals were in clients in Pennsylvania. Well, no, that's not true. AWAI. But I went to the conference in Texas, met the people there, and all right, so I did meet them in person by going to a conference. But my other first couple clients were in Pennsylvania, people that I knew, people that my dad could introduce me to, people in my network could introduce me to. So I had that, and then I had a reputation that made it. I had some things going for me when I actually did go to other conferences. So you can meet people online if you have enough content and authority. If you have that big authority piece that is out there that people have referenced, or if you have a platform of like I don't know, like the show, you could send people to this, just our episodes, and say, hey, look, this is what I've been doing. I've actually been out there in the world working. Um, then it's a different story. You can be very selective. You don't have to go to every event. You don't have to take the shotgun approach. You can take the like sniper approach. And like there is, I don't know, for you, it might be the largest SaaS conference in the world happens in Los Angeles every year. It might be worth it for you to make that one big trip and say, well, here's my resume. Here's the people I freelance for in Australia, and maybe go as far as Sydney, right? Um, and then say like, hey, I'm right here. Like this is my skill set. But you've gone to the right place with already the right reputation. So you can be much more strategic in that sense. But I still think there's something about meeting people in person. All my biggest clients have been like, looked them in the eye and shook their hand. I just don't think you can quite replace somebody that's going to give you $100,000 over the course of a year. It's hard to do that without meeting them face to face. It's hard for them to like get over that hurdle of like, I'm going to pay this person a lot, and all I know is their Zoom character, right? So, I mean, that is when you get to the big deals. If you want, like, if you're doing under $5,000 projects, it probably isn't that huge of a deal, and you can make a lot of money doing $5,000 projects over and over. But if you're going to get to those big retainer deals, the big 6-figure contracts, stuff like that, it's one of those. There's just no substitute for in person.
Yeah, cool. That's good advice. And I think I live about an hour from a capital city, and from there, domestic flights to the other capital cities are not that big a deal. They're fairly cheap, and I assume it's similar for you. Once you get to, I don't know, maybe Philadelphia is big enough that domestic flights to New York, LA, Dallas, wherever are pretty cheap and easy.
I'm an hour and a half. I'm an hour and a half from Philadelphia International and an hour and 40 from Newark. So like I have the entire globe covered basically.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. East Coast US is oddly central.
It's a long stretch, but from like Boston to DC is one of the most dense but like connected places in the entire world.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's what everyone from here does. We go to Bali. That's out in Mexico. That's where you can do all the illegal stuff on the cheap. That's where people want to go on holidays. But usually the way people do it is they fly to Perth, which is on the far west coast. So the vast majority of the population of Australia is on the east coast, the Pacific Ocean side. So it's across the ocean from California. But then over the other side, our west coast, there's a city called Perth. You usually fly to Perth and then fly to Bali. But as you come into Perth, what the pilot will tell you is, welcome to the most isolated city in the world. And it's true. It's the city that's the furthest from any other city.
Fascinating. I remember I ended up, it was years ago, I was working with Jed Canty, wrote this whole promo. It was about, I think it was either a mineral or an oil discovery in Australia. And it was in a town called Coober Pedy, where all the houses are like tunnels, mines underground. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. It's like this network of caves that people live in. And I'm like, oh, that's
Yeah.
Australia? Crazy down
Yeah,
there.
it's a mine. The whole country is pretty much a mine. There's a smattering of little cities where people live, and then it's all mines and farms. So yeah, it's a third world country. It's pretending to be a first world country, but it's kind of a third world country.
Well, it is interesting that you do have that concentration of population right along the yeah, I guess it's the East Coast for you. Um, I always think of Australia as West, but it's actually, I mean, it's pretty much the exact opposite side of the world for me.
Kind of
So
everything's
could
inverted.
go either way to get there.
Summer is winter, East Coast is West Coast. It's all of that. It's like Canada, how all the Canadians are pushed down against their southern border.
That's just for the warmth.
Yeah, it's for the beach here.
So speaking of that, what do you think? We were talking a little bit before this about kind of the differences. So what we are actually talking about is the whole crazy situation going on with Texas, and it's so weird for people. Like, we're recording this on, it's my Thursday, it's Nick's Friday, so who knows? We could be in a full blown civil war by the time this comes out. But basically, Governor Abbott was putting up razor wire to stop the insane flow of immigrants coming across the Mexican border. Again, not Mexican immigrants. These are people from the impoverished South American countries, Africa, Asia, the Middle East. It's crazy. We don't even know who's coming over. Biden had the national, like he had his own army taking down the razor wire, which the Supreme Court gave him the go ahead for. And basically, Governor Abbott of Texas said, yeah, we're going to keep putting up this wire. Come do something about it. This is our right. We're calling this an invasion. We're going to stop it. Anyway, like 12 or 13 other states have signed on to support Texas at this point. And it's one of those weird situations where it looks like it has the potential to turn into a civil war. It could also just fizzle out, and this could be a big like nothing burger, as they say, and it just nothing happens from this, and everybody goes back to normal, and one side backs down. Um, but Nick, you were saying it's like impossible for you to imagine the different Australian states even considering fighting against each other.
Yeah, for me that'd be really strange, and I'll come to something else about Australia in a second. But what the thing with Australia is that people move between the states a lot. So my wife Caitlin, one of her bridesmaids, has just gone to Western Australia, which is Perth, the really isolated city. They've just moved over there. They'll be there for a couple of years. They'll come back. But I think part of that is the mines, right? People do what's called fly in, fly out. So they live in one city, which might be in a different state, and they live there 3 days a week and fly to a mine in another state 4 days a week, work there and fly back. Because the mines actually tend to pay fairly well. So they go out there, work 12-hour days driving mining trucks, and then come back and have the lifestyle in the city on the weekends. And so people are very mobile between states here. I live in a different state than where I grew up. And it would be very strange for us to fight because more of our stuff is federal. We do, like, the states are separate. We have a degree of federalism, but more of our stuff is run at the federal level compared to the US. And so it's more cohesive. The idea that we'd have one geographic state fight against another is very, very unlikely. People think of themselves as Australians first. So that'd be a tough sell. The other thing that's worth noting about us compared to the US is that whatever you think of this, it's controversial. Not everyone's on board with it, but we have really strong borders. Part of that is geographical, right? We're surrounded by water. That gives a certain advantage.
Yeah.
But there was so the sort of the left Labor government is in power at the moment, but what's confusingly called the Liberals are kind of our right. When they were in power, one of the things that kept winning them elections was that they would stop the boats, which was just all these people coming from Indonesia, from north of us, coming by boat to Australia. So they basically started turning boats back and having the Coast Guard or the Navy or whatever, just no, absolutely not, no boats coming in. That got them re-election. So there's a lot of legal immigration, which a lot of people aren't happy about because housing is really expensive, and they're going, look, we can't take another 500,000 people in here and house them. We can't build property fast enough. People who grew up here are living in tents. So there's a housing crisis, and they're saying, look, the legal immigration needs to stop. But illegal immigration here is very low.
That's interesting. How do you feel about immigration in general? Because there's the libertarian conflict, I guess, of like as a pure ANCAP theology, it's hard for me to get on board with national borders. Like I don't think states should exist in the way they do. So like for a state to say this is our line, you can't cross it because of you were born here is ridiculous. But also we have this insane social network where like as soon as you cross that border, all of a sudden I owe you thousands and thousands of dollars in services with my tax money. Because we don't have the perfect like ANCAP society, right? These are not like in a perfect world, it would be all private borders. And if you're not trespassing on somebody's, like if you own the property, you get to decide who comes in and out. And if it's unowned property, either claim it, right, and homestead it, or there's no real rule. But I don't know, this whole border crisis in Texas and Arizona and the southern states it seems intentionally designed for political purposes, which is why I don't mind the Texans and Arizonans like standing up to stop it, because it feels like one side is literally doing it for political advantage, which anything somebody's doing, especially, it's not that I have any love for the Republican Party in the US, but like the Democrats have gone out of their mind right now in the last 10, 20 years, something like that. So it's, I don't want them to gain any more power than they already have. And then it's scary if you hear some of the talk of like some of these senators and congressmen saying, well, U.S. citizens don't want to fight in the army, so we're going to recruit all these people that aren't American to come fight in the American army. And like, who are they fighting? Will it be us? Like, will it be the libertarians living on 15 acres in the middle of the woods? Like, I don't know. It's hard to imagine, my friends that, grew up and joined the army wanting to invade my property, but it's not as hard to imagine a foreign national doing what they're told. And uh, I don't know. It's the immigration is sticky because from a just philosophical level, I believe in open borders, but from a practical, what the world is now is like, dude, we got to shut this down.
Yeah, yeah, I think I basically agree. It's ideologically, yes, national borders are typically just imaginary lines. Uh, some of them are geographical. Like Australia has a national border that is the ocean, and that kind of that helps politically sometimes. I think that's even true with Texas, right? Because there's a river. The Rio Grande is pretty much the border, if I understand correctly, and that I think helps because there's this sort of very objective sense of the border should be here, not 100 kilometers, 100 miles further that way or this way. It kind of gives this line that everyone can kind of agree is where it ought to be. And so I think if Texas had seceded from the US and became an ANCAP society and everything was private property, it's pretty likely that there would be a private property border at the Rio Grande anyway, which I think in this particular case
Yeah,
maybe simplifies. It just helps me think it through.
there would be dozens and dozens of borders, right? Because it
Yeah.
would all be different private property.
And surely the people that own all the property along the Rio Grande would contract with each other that we are going to help each other maintain this line. You would have to think they would
Yeah,
find some voluntary agreement to do that.
I also think if we had the if we got rid of the social programs and we didn't say we're going to give you free healthcare and medical care and all the other benefits, and literally you had to come, like, if you could come here if you want, but you have to work, like,
Mm.
there are no social programs, we could have not an open border, but you could have almost unlimited immigration
Yeah,
because you'd only get the people that want to come and work. You're not going to get people wouldn't come here to want to starve on the street.
yeah,
That's not how humans work. It's the fact that we're bribing immigrants to come in, or somebody's paying them and telling them a fairy tale about what you can get, and then some of it's real. Like, they're out of hotel rooms in New York City and Chicago because they house too many homeless in them and immigrants. It's crazy.
it
It doesn't make any
it
sense.
is absolutely crazy. So I that saying that the difference between a libertarian and an ANCAP is 6 months. So during that 6 months for me, I started thinking through, well, what if I was going to go into politics and try and get all these libertarian policies enacted through the political system? And I wrote up a bunch of policy things. That, here's how I would think about some of these issues, and just trying to think it through. One of the things was, well, we could just have as much immigration as we want, and we set a price. We use the price system. You can come here, and you just have to pay $100,000 because that proves that you have $100,000 and you're productive and you're not going to be a drain on the system. And if there's too many people coming for, the infrastructure hasn't caught up yet or something, we raise the price. And if we are running short on labor, we lower the price, and the price system can solve it. And that seemed very logical to me. And then over time, I realized that there's no government in the world that's going to execute that well.
No. The one politically potentially feasible solution I've seen is the private sponsor version. So, like, let's say you
Mm.
own, this is going to sound
Yes.
stereotypical, but like you own a Florida orange grove. I can sponsor as many people as I want. Like, I can import as many workers as I want, as long as I take responsibility. Like, if they get hurt, I'm paying their medical bills. They're not, like, if they're homeless, I'm not putting them on public assistance. I am taking responsibility for this person's financial security while they're here. Largely because hopefully it would probably be the employer. Um, but I don't know if you have a friend, like I have some friends I know in Mexico that, like, perfectly good, hardworking, good people. Like, I'd 100% vouch for them to come in the event that something went horribly wrong. I'd take the financial risk if I trusted these people enough. So, like, that sponsor model, I think, can work and is more politically feasible than the you have to be able to pay this much to come in, which basically eliminates all the pores of the world from immigrating anywhere.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So, and I think again, it's just the price system. So there's a price, and you can pay it yourself, or someone can sponsor you. And the other thing would be, hey, not only are you on the hook for, maybe paying medical bills or something like that, but if you sponsor someone to come in and they commit a crime, you're liable.
Yes, that is one of
So
the other, yeah,
that then incentivizes you to vet people carefully and not just go, "Oh, sponsor everybody."
right. I would say it should probably be a different type of liability, just thinking this through, than like pure one-to-one liability. Like if I sponsor somebody and they happen to get drunk and get in a bar fight and somebody dies, I don't want to be on the hook for murder. That's a little too far. Um,
Yeah,
but maybe I'm responsible for their court costs. Like if they don't have a public defender, like I don't know. There's some liability there. So you're not letting in a bunch of knuckleheads. I agree with that. I don't know. All these things can be worked out. These are all details, but they're not trying to solve any immigration crisis in the U.S. right now. Like
no,
almost nobody is. I know the Republicans are complaining about it, but they're not really doing anything. This is the first sign of a backbone I've ever seen, and it's over putting up border wire on a border they're not allowed legally not allowed to be crossing. Yet Biden's coming in and his administration is tearing down the border, like literally tearing down the border. I don't
yeah,
understand
it's
the mindset behind this.
yeah, I'm cynical at this point. I think they're trying to sow discord and create division in the society, and divide and rule.
I'm curious, from your perspective, what would the world look like if the U.S. broke into, let's just say two for the sake of this discussion, that there was some way of dividing the states up, and the United States just suddenly became not a major player in the world, but because of a national divorce or a civil war. What do you think that would do to Australia first, and then I guess the world order? Like, would you be worried that China's all of a sudden going to invade Australia?
Uh, Short answer is yes. Yes, I would be worried about that. Australia's relationship with China is complicated because they are far and away our biggest uh, export partner. So we export a lot of our raw materials to them. Like I said, it's a big mine and a big farm, and they are the buyer of a lot of that stuff. And it wouldn't surprise me entirely if they just said, you know what, how about we just have it all? We're a lot bigger than you. There's, our army could probably be the size of your population if we, you know, did enough conscription, and that does trouble me a bit. Uh, on the other hand, I had a conversation just last night that reminded me that we had that conversation about guns and do Australians have guns, and I realized that the people in the town where I live are actually significantly better armed than I realized. So I discovered that I'm careful. A friend of a friend apparently has recently managed to purchase, quote, a pallet of unregistered firearms. I think who needs a pallet
Good
of
for him.
guns? That's a lot of guns. And has managed to procure for himself the gear to manufacture his own bullets,
Yeah,
which
that's
I thought
not
was
hard to
very,
get.
very.
Actually, it's actually but between 3D printing and like the materials and the systems to create your own ammunition, like I think guns are going to have to be legal worldwide sooner or later because they're just going to be unstoppable. Like
Yeah,
I don't know if they'll be legal. It'll be illegal. Like like the federal law prohibits weed in Colorado. Yeah, it's technically illegal, but there's no one stopping it. There's no possible way to stop it.
yeah. So this is the myth of the rule of law, right?
Ah, that's a beautiful essay. Yes. Um, Exactly. If there's no will, if it is the law is largely dictated by culture and what people will accept. It's arbitrary up to a point. What is enforceable is what is socially acceptable to be enforced. If people don't want something enforced, it is impossible for a government to enforce it. That goes all the way to like North Korea. Like the people there are so terrified they're brainwashed really, otherwise they couldn't be held under the conditions if they didn't on some level allow it, which is I like horribly abused people, like they don't understand, and like they literally think Kim Jong-un can read their mind, so or Kim
Mm.
Jong-il. We go through leaders.
I think libertarians, we like to say that the government is not good at anything, but that's not true. There is one thing that they are, by definition, extremely good at, and that is propaganda.
Yes, ever since World War I, that has been the main lever of power for governments.
That is why they get things done.
This is why I like Curtis Yarvin's concept of the cathedral, where it's not just the government, it's the university system, the press, and the government working together, because that loop creates the propaganda. So, like, the ideas are formed in the university, they're propagated by the press, and they're largely enforced by the government. But like, that's the circle. You need all three working together to have the level of control they do.
Mm.
So that's why I don't know. It seems like every journalistic outlet in America this week laid off half their staff, which I'm thrilled about. Like, goodbye to all those journos. And I don't know. Sports Illustrated finally went under after putting
Oh, really?
a bunch of men as women of the year. Basically went under. Yeah. So I feel like reality is catching up to this, and the nobody trusts the journalistic institution anymore. This is, I think now, it used to be that there was no alternative to the mainstream press, or the corporate press, as Michael Malice would have you call it. Now there is an alternative. This is actually, I know you're not a believer in Bitcoin, but this is something that Guy Swan made a point on Clint Russell's podcast one time, of in the 2008 financial crisis. The dollar should have been done by all rights. The way it was treated, the way it was abused and printed, it should have been done, but there was nowhere else to flee. So if Bitcoin ever catches on to the point where people can flee to it and feel safe fleeing to it, the dollar is done in very short order after that. So like I feel like that's what's happening to the press. It's collapsing because there's somewhere to go. There's an alternative to it. Thanks to people like you and I doing the Lord's work in sharing good freelancing and cultural information. But I really mean that the world is changing because there's alternatives out there. Options are freedom in a lot of ways, and people will choose the best options if you actually have a market system working. The crappy ones will collapse.
Could not agree more. Could not agree more. And I think what Michael Malice is doing there by calling them the corporate media, I think that is an example of using the tool of propaganda positively. And so that kind of thing is really important. Force them to take labels with the negative connotations. That's how you win the hearts and minds of people. And so we want to see more of that. And I wasn't going to bring it up, but you brought it up. So I'm going to say this is something I think Bitcoiners are great at. Even the fact that they call themselves Bitcoiners and they say things like Bitcoin, not crypto, and these and try to distinguish themselves. And I don't mean this in a pejorative way. The people that call themselves Bitcoiners are great propagandists. I don't mean that they're deceiving people. I mean that they're pushing a message to the culture very effectively. People know the term fiat. They know what that means because of Bitcoiners. And so, there's this real sense, even though I have some very nerdy technical reasons for thinking that Bitcoin's not the most effective solution for having a decentralized hard money. I think there are better options. Those are technical reasons, not cultural. I think that the Bitcoiners, the people involved, they are totally my people. I'm on board with their agenda completely. And in a way, I think I said it to Jethro. I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that I'm just totally wrong in my opinions there. I hope that the Bitcoiners win and I'm forced to eat crow. Because I want them. They're the kind of people I want to win.
I think yes, it's a messaging, but it's also it's true believers. Like you can't have the level of the messaging level that they have without actually believing it, because people are literally putting their life savings into this. Like this is not something that many people, like a lot of people, are taking. Oh, just like there are a number of people who are just like, oh yeah, I have a lot of rich friends who are like, this Bitcoin thing is nuts, but I have a Bitcoin just because who knows what could happen. It's gone up, it's gone down, uh, so they have one. But like there's people that like put every dollar they cashed out their 401ks, put it all in Bitcoin. And some of them are very happy, and some of them did that at $69,000. And they're still true believers. That's the thing. It doesn't matter. Like they believe in the long-term vision, and they're not giving up. And they have educated the world on economics, like you were saying, to a level like that no one else has done since Ron Paul, maybe even, and they're more effective than Ron Paul. I don't like who would have thought a dork like Saifedean would be so popular. Like he's just an economist professor that writes economics books and has the one book, the Bitcoin Standard. But if he goes on a podcast, he has 1 million views overnight. He's amazing. And then there's Michael Saylor, the MIT dork billionaire, he's very persuasive when he speaks about Bitcoin, and he's all in on it. There's too much cultural cachet and power behind Bitcoin for it not to be a force moving forward. I cannot see it going away when it has almost $1 trillion market cap. There's nothing that gets to this level and goes away in history.
I'm going to blackball myself here and say, I think Saylor is a Fed.
I have had thoughts along those directions. I don't know though. He really is fully invested. I could see it going either way. You could convince me almost anyone is a Fed right now. Anyone in public, any public figure, like I don't know. You could get me if you make the right argument. I might think Tom Woods is a Fed. That's not true, Tom. I don't think that. They're not a Fed. But Dave Smith, the guy's shady.
Well, I don't know. Can I make those jokes in this podcast? No, of course he's shady. He's a Jew. No, that's not true. All my children have Hebrew names, for the record.
All right. What else? So
I don't think I don't think it would go that well for China to invade Australia.
No, I don't think it would go well. I don't think China. I think China seems to be more. They lean more towards economic domination. So I think they would send in a lot of people to try to buy up all your mines. Um,
Yeah,
that's what they're doing in Africa. But Australia has too much money to be persuaded the same way that the African countries were. Like the African countries had honestly, it was corrupt leaders taking $1 billion bribes to just give the Chinese free access to their resources. So that was a corrupt deal. Australia probably wouldn't go down that road. You just have too well developed of a civil culture to allow a couple individuals to take $1 billion bribes and sell all your natural resources out.
there's no shortage of corruption
You
here,
skeptical of that? Oh,
but
I believe that.
counterbalancing that is that while I don't think this is a good thing, it is the counterbalance that there's a lot of kind of protectionist sentiment. There's there's a lot of people out there who would like to see a law passed that says if you're a Chinese national, you can't own property here or something, or some strong limitation on what you can and can't own. Now, libertarian perspective, I don't like that, and yet, given certain other problems that exist, it's maybe a counterbalance to those problems. It's what Mises called this sort of cascade of intervention. You create this anti-libertarian law that creates distortion in the market, and so you intervene in the market again to try and fix that, which causes another problem, and just so on down the line. You keep intervening to fix your previous interventions. And so, protectionist ownership laws, I think, would be an example of that.
I'm curious, what do you think the best argument against libertarianism or ANCAP type theology is? Because, or not theology, philosophy. There's a theology. Some people treat it like a theology, but that's different. Because I hear all these arguments all the time, like without the state, you'd be over. Like I was just listening to Owen Benjamin on. He went on Joshua Smith's podcast. And first of all, Josh didn't do the best job defending himself, but Owen Smith is a freight train comedian. It's hard to handle. But he was saying like, oh yeah, if the government just went away, it would be 8 people in a pickup truck would come take over all your stuff and like do horrible things to your wife. And like, you'd be overrun with no recourse in minutes. And I'm like, that's such a weak argument because first of all, where I live, the cops are 45 minutes away. As somebody posted on Twitter, is like, yeah, what would we do without the cops showing up 40 minutes late and shooting your dog? I mean, it's like the arguments against the police are so weak. But do you think there's any really good argument against that you don't really have the best answer for against a libertarian type ethic?
I'm struggling to come up with an example because honestly, I have thought this through at length from like first principles. So there's not a lot of roads I haven't traveled down and ultimately decided no, I think the ANCAPs are right.
Well, here I'll give you one that I've heard and I don't have a great answer for. How about that?
Go for
So,
it.
Multiple people have pointed this out, and usually it's like deep into a libertarian argument. They talk about, especially in the U.S., the international or the highway system that connects all the states. The interstate highway system it was a massive project after World War II. Well, actually, kind of during World War II and then after it. That it really did there's no doubt that it led to an economic boom. Like that was government money that was invested that directly had returns in the economy. It connected so many industries. It created new transportation industries that weren't possible before. Like because you could build bigger trucks to go on these bigger highways that no real ANCAP type society would be willing to make that multi-billion-dollar investment to connect a bunch of places that weren't even developed yet. So that's the one you're like, I can see other ways. I'm like, you're putting your hand in the economy too much, and other places would have emerged, and other solutions would have emerged. But it really did have it's a government program that had a almost entirely positive effect, other than the people that had their land confiscated to build those highways. So how would you answer that? Like, what's your thought on there?
So I guess I would say yes. There is a point to be made there that some things are more effectively done by a top-down approach. So there are certain tasks you want to perform where you don't want it to be done by a committee because what's the thing to say? Hey, a camel is a horse designed by a committee. You can have too many cooks in the kitchen, and if you try to decentralize everything too much, that's what you can get. Having said that, I still don't think it's necessarily true that you couldn't get that highway network. So I think about like the supply chain to get you an iPhone. I think if you're Apple, you probably do own actually quite a lot of the parts of that supply chain, and you would make multi-billion-dollar investments in making that supply chain more efficient. It would not be crazy at all for Apple to directly own a fleet of large ships and planes and things to move their raw materials from mine to factory and then from factory to the country where they're going to sell them. This kind of thing. So I think there are large entities that could still do those kind of top-down approaches. So I don't think that's precluded in a libertarian society. It's just this is the classic Thomas Sowell thing, right? Compared to what? So it doesn't make sense to compare an established first world government to a society that's just taken that away and hasn't had time to replace it with anything voluntary yet. It's sort of an unfair comparison, so it's worth keeping that in mind. But yes, having said that, some things are better done top down, and I think the strongest argument I would say for a non-libertarian society is that some people definitely do benefit from a kind of paternalistic approach. Which is, so the example I'm thinking of is that I knew a guy who had some substantial mental health struggles. I couldn't tell exactly what condition he was dealing with, but he was morbidly obese. He obviously had self-control issues tied up with that, and for whatever reason, whatever had happened in his life, the court had appointed him what they called an adult guardian. So he was on welfare, and the welfare payments didn't go to him. They went to this court-appointed person who then decided they were going to use it to pay for his living expenses to stay at this particular it's sort of like a nursing home, but not for old folks, for people dealing with mental health crisis. So they were going to pay his room and board and food there. That left him with very little. It left him with like $20 a fortnight of spending money or something very, very basic. And he wasn't happy about that. But I'm sort of looking at that guy and going, you would absolutely be homeless if they didn't force that upon you.
He has no family or anybody to take care of him, like, because that's where you would hope that a family or church structure would step in.
Well, I spent a bunch of time with the guy, and he told me about certain people that were friends that were like sort of his support network and things like that. And it became apparent that he was pushing them away in various ways. I'll tell this story because I thought it was hilarious. He got in the car once. I was driving him somewhere. I was actually giving him a ride to church because he was coming to church with me for a while. And he told me he had these friends that they were also on a welfare payment, and they had started a business cutting up firewood and selling firewood. But it was all off the books because if they were earning a certain amount of money, their welfare payments would get cut and so on. So it was all on the down low. And he told me, I found out about this and I was so indignant. They were ripping off the system and this. And so I told them, look, I'm going to rat you out for this. You need to cut me in. You need to give me a cut of the proceeds or I'm going to rat you out because this is just unethical. And I'm driving this guy around looking at him going, mate, I don't think you can have that both ways. If it's unethical, you don't get to ask for a cut and still be morally indignant about it.
Yeah.
But obviously they then cut off relationship with him, and it just became apparent that even if he had a lot of support network around him, his nature was to push people away a bit. I think there's a lot of people in not exactly that situation, but a variety of things where it's not crazy to say, look, you would be a little better off if someone stepped in and made some of your decisions for you, at least for a while.
I think it actually is one of the big questions in, like, say we ever get to a private law society, which I prefer that to anarchist society just because people either intentionally or unintentionally misinterpret what I mean by anarchism. So private law society at least conveys what I mean a little better. But it is the hardest thing to deal with is the absolute fringes of society. So the 1% psychopathic murderers, like, you have to have a solution for those people. You can't let them run around a society. It causes too much havoc. And no matter what you do in every civilization, it's going to be, 0.5 to 2% of the population are just broken mentally. They're bad people. I don't know what it is, but you can't get around that. And then you have the through no fault of their own, through some mental handicap or physical handicap, some birth defect, people can't take care of themselves. And if you're born into a poor family or without the right resources, I don't want these people dying on the street. Now, hopefully charities would take over a lot of the sadder cases. And I think, look, if you stop taxing the American people out the wazoo, I think there was actually a study on this. When tax rates went up, charitable giving just dropped off. And America used to be one of the most generous. It still is actually one of the most generous, at least in terms of charitable contributions, countries in the world. So hopefully that would pick up. But the criminal justice, like, what do you do with murderers? Like, because there are clearly some people that deserve to die. Who in a private state gets to decide that? It's tough. I don't know. It's a tough question for me to think about.
I think at a theoretical level, John Locke answered this very well, and it's. I wrote a bunch of stuff about capital punishment and the ethics of that in my own book. I don't want to plug, but just to make the point, a lot of people will say, "Look, an
Plug
ANCAP
it.
society's never been tried," and my answer to that is actually it totally has, or something very, very close to it, to the point where it's worth calling it an ANCAP society, and it was ancient Israel. Before ancient Israel had a king, they had several centuries where they had no king, no taxes, and they tried it both ways. And I think the big lesson, a large portion of my book is kind of about comparing those two phases. And my big takeaway from it is that while I think the ANCAP society thing is a good way to go, voluntarist, decentralized law, they had all of that. There was multiple independent judges you could go to for rulings. The idea of law is the rulings of the judges, that was openly embraced. That's a really fascinating thing, actually. Just very slight digression in Augustine. So the ancient church father Augustine, he looks back to what for him was ancient history and says, before there were empires, before there were kings, we didn't have laws. The decisions of the princes were instead of laws, which I thought was it was just that one throwaway line. I thought it was fascinating that just, yeah, the myth of the rule of law, they fully understood that people make decisions and that's what the real rules are. But that aside, Israel had this decentralized law phase and it was not a panacea. Terrible things happened. People suffered. Horrible crimes were done. That's not to say it was worse, but it also wasn't perfect. So I think for libertarians, I think the lesson there is that even if we get a fully voluntary society, it's not going to solve all the problems. It's not going to be paradise. It's not going to be heaven on earth. That's just not enough.
No, the utopian thinking is dangerous in any ideology. If you believe that there is a utopian outcome, it's horrifyingly dangerous to that society. If enough people believe that the perfect society can be built, because generally it means we have to kill everybody who's standing in our way of getting to perfection. Like almost without exception, people that have utopian ideas end up mass murdering, like it's or trying to.
Yeah.
So you can't. But solving some problems of like anarchism solves a lot of problems. It doesn't make the perfect world. Like it solves a lot of problems of like you wouldn't have world wars. Like you wouldn't have all these corrupt monopolies that are government sanctioned through regulations. Like there's a lot of problems that it solves, but yeah, it doesn't solve income inequality. It doesn't solve the fact that people are going to kill each other, and then there are psychopaths in the world, and it's a fallen race, right? We're born into sin, so you're not getting out of that.
Exactly. It's optimal.
But
It's not perfect.
there are better ways of. Yes, it's funny. Wasn't Israel like when they demanded a king? Wasn't God like, "You sure you want this?"
Yeah.
Like,
It wasn't even, are you sure? It's for real. You don't want this. Here, let me tell you all the things that are going to go wrong if we do this. You know how bad it's going to be? You're going to have a king. He's going to take 10% of everything you own. 10%. It's going to be terrible. And, we just laugh at that now.
fascinating. All right, man. It's actually we got started a little late today, so I think we're gonna end it there. Anything else you want to share? Oh, by the way, I ran some numbers today. You are the most popular clipped person on my entire YouTube channel. You have over 140,000 views on YouTube Shorts. So I wanted to congratulate you for being super popular. I don't know if it's the amazing insights you share or just that darling Australian accent, but you are extremely popular.
I'm not going to lie. I think it's partly the accent. I knew one guy in college who, like, he had a YouTube channel when that was not that many people had one of those yet. And he just took questions about nonsense and answered them. And I think people just sheerly watched it for his accent.
Maybe it also, I think the most popular one you have is the Australians and machine guns clip, and that has like 40 some thousand views, and I think it's an Australian talking about machine guns in accent is extremely appealing to my audience for
Yeah,
whatever reason.
we can do more of that. Do more of what the audience wants. It's Australia Day here, which even that is controversial, but it's a public holiday and it's hard to say no to that. So we're going to have a big barbecue and have a bunch of friends over, and it's summer.
All right, well, Enjoy your summer. I have 6 inches of snow outside, and I will enjoy that. And in the meantime, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Stay free.
Great talking to you.